Okay. Um, so I'm doing all this stuff, and then Jarret's oh, um, yeah, so just, you know, be thinking about, the roommate paying $500 and how lazy he is and doesn't really do much, um and he kind of helps with the cabin and stuff, and I pay him, and so he paid that coworker about $100 per stay, and at that time, it was pretty much one stay a night, and he's like, okay, well, these people are staying for more than one night because I've changed the rules, and so now they have to stay for at least 3 nights, um, something like that. And so then he's like, so, when you walk in, if you want the work, because his roommate was like, no, I want to move out, and um, yeah, uh, so then at that moment, um, Jarret's like, oh, who's going to take care of the cabin? And because he has to go and work in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, which is about an hour, and so like an hour and a half, um, to drive and to get there. And so he's like, who's going to take care of the cabin? And he didn't really want to keep driving back. He's like, I could, but I don't want to. And then he's like, so do you want the job? Do you want the work so you can have some extra money? And start saving. And then, uh, I was like, yeah, sure. And, and so he didn't really pay me for training. I kind of just like was in there and, was told somewhat about specific things. And so, he's like, yeah, the last roommate has to clean, pretty much after one stay, and I'm paying him about $100, some dollars. And then he's like, but I've changed the stuff in the Airbnb or Airbnb, um, and um, and you'll be paid $100 for each clean. And just a warning, are you are going to be cleaning after someone after staying there for a few days, so make sure that that you might be walking into a dirtier place, and you have about 4 hours, when it's a close call of another guest coming in, and just make sure that everything's done by then. And I'm cleaning extra, and I'm cleaning extra, if you can't tell by his snarky remarks, because it's Wyoming and it's that type of nuance, witty. I have heard you tell me about waiting for your green card, which I pretty much told him, hey, at max it's gonna be like 5 months, and so a month in, he's like, start thinking about $500. And so here I am left with thinking, okay, so about $500 of rent for a room. That does not include everything I've been doing that now he expects for free. And I'm like, okay, well, so $500, and I'll figure out all that stuff once I can get everything set up. And then he gets mad about work stuff and work not allowing his dog to stay over there anymore, so he has to stay in the truck, not in the little little RV that he had over there, because his dog Annie got in a fight. He would like to say she got attacked, just Annie. And so, then he's like, oh, you need to get your own food, huh? And then I'm like, oh, so does that mean, like really happy, I'm like, so does that mean you're gonna pay me? Look, he loves that almost got erased, but it says rooms cleaned, because he bought this for scheduling for the Airbnb and for me to write down some stuff. And so here's the 3, including the 2, which he paid me one of $100, and then the second one he only paid me $80. And then I thought he forgot the extra 20, and then he's like, no, it's 80. And then he's like, okay, but the other ones, yeah, don't worry about it. It's gonna be 100 again. And then I asked him about it, and then he got so pissed off, and he's like, don't ask me about it. And so now I have $300 that I'm supposed to be paid, plus, he's like, yeah, all this extra cleaning and all this stuff is just expected, which, by the way, taking care of all this stuff, including his pets, all this stuff, okay, is actually supposed to be close to $700 just in the week. And then he's like, you're so ungrateful. And then still knowing all that, and then still being like, oh, and then you're still going to have to think about that extra $700, which, by the way, in 2 months it's already over $1,000. And that doesn't include the times where he's like, he got flirty, and like his punk side came out, not just his country side. And then, like I don't know what he was on, but like trying to flirt with hands around my waist, and like trying to like have me touch him. And I'm like, yeah, no. And then that's when he starts adding the good things that I do around here and turns it around. And then he's like, oh yeah, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. So like tagging on more things. And he barely feeds one animal. And Annie sometimes gets a lot of food, sometimes doesn't. And that also included him thinking that I needed to run Annie around all over town, because she's a outside dog. But I'm like, yeah, no. She also needs to like know how it is to be calm, because she also has high anxiety with other people and outside stuff. And so she can sometimes be jumpy. And so I'm like, this would be a nice place for her to figure that out. I mean, she likes me enough to stay calm and not bark at me. She hasn't barked at me. So I was like, okay, so that's a good thing, which is, already an expense just to find a person that the dog gets along with, just like the cat. And then this is sort of kind of picked up, but I cleaned. I didn't have to. I decided to clean this place. And obviously all this stuff is not clean again, which I eventually understood, like, hey, someone's, committed to a project, but, it takes a month to forget that I worked pretty much what would be a day and night amount of cleaning in an afternoon, because, I still wanted to be reassuring that, I'm a tidy person, even though he picked me up in the streets. And he, shouldn't see me as someone that doesn't have anything to offer. But then he took advantage of that, and, he's like, okay, so why can't you do that all the time? Like that type of attitude, especially if he's tagging on more money that he feels that he's owed, when he brought me here with no expectations besides giving me a room, because he's like, that is awful what you've been going through, and trying to find food and trying to find resources. And then, him being like, oh my God, I have to, have you share my food, I have to share my food with you. And then he says that here, but when I was out with him, because he didn't want me to stay here, he was like, yeah, you can come here and clean and get settled when we're here, but preferably it would be best to go with me to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, so that you can take care of Annie over there. And Kenny can stay here, and when you're over there, you can take care of Annie, and so that she doesn't have to stay inside in the camper all day, and she can have her time outside, and you can feed her, or sometimes Jarret would be like, oh no, you have to be on these extra pet health things, because he buys her these oh, he took the tub, but it's pet health stuff. And so, you know, that's already a pet care person. And then he like wanted that personal person around over there for the time that he is working. And then, you know, he's like, oh my gosh, well, I have the graveyard shift, so, you know, I'm not necessarily with Annie. And then you can be that person for Annie, and then that gives me maybe a good 5 hours with Annie, and then I go to bed and work. And then I'm like, okay, so I at least know the time period and the expectations, and you know, like that kind of stuff. And then me taking care of Annie apparently was not enough to have him feel good about giving me some cash or money so that I could feed myself. He's like, no, you're going to have to wait till tomorrow. So he brings a bag of bread and some tomatoes. And so he puts a tomato piece on a piece of bread. And then he's like, there you go. And then he's like making a joke out of it. Well, I'm like hungry, right? I'm pretty much crying. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I'm like crying because I'm like, this is not any better. And so, you know, he jokingly is like making a joke about that piece of bread and tomato, and because, you know, I don't eat meat. I'll eat different things, but just not meat. And him already being like, yeah, you are on the thin side. And then him saying all this stuff and then making a joke because he has a form of ADHD and autism. And then he will make a joke out of